Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. This week I'm doing something a little bit different in that firstly, you're seeing me, and secondly, there's another person. This is Monkey, aka Gavin. What do you want to be known as in this?
Monkey.
The Monkey. He continues to be known as Monkey. He's from the Winters SEO kind of intern club that we all film with him, like myself. So he's come down this week, and we are going to be filming with Winters on Winters' channel as well, so that'll be coming out soon. But we're going to be filming something hobby related here, and it's all because of you. What was the idea?
So, the idea was to do something with this, a little IKEA frame.
Yeah, a little box frame.
So, little box frame, little diorama. We've got a little project lined up for another mate's gym. We'll see what we can get done.
Yeah, so simple as that. We're going to build a little Warhammer related diorama inside a frame. It'll look pretty and nice. And we both got very different ideas of what we're doing. So we're going to draw out our little designs to show you what we're looking at doing. And then hopefully the final results will look somewhat similar. So without further ado, we're not doing this Winters SEO nonsense where we talk for 20 minutes. We're just going to crack on. So mine's super simple. It's going to be the box, fairly obviously, with a background like a nebula thing that I've already got printed out that I'll show you guys in a bit. I'm going to build up some like mud and earth to make like an embankment or some kind of hill. And then we're going to put our protagonist facing off towards like this valley or this nebula thing in the sky. There's the little gun, very cute. And then they're standing next to a recently dug grave, which I have some cool props for. And, you know, just thrown random boxes and stuff around. We'll pretty it up and add some things. Maybe do some tank track imprints. I could probably do something fun there. But yeah, that's the plan. Hopefully it looks something similar by the end. So Monkey, what are you doing for your box art?
So this is an old codex. I think it's the 3rd edition codex for Space Wolves. And I think this is the first time we've ever seen Crom Dragon Gaze in picture. So obviously they released the model later on. So we're going to try and craft Crom slaying some orcs on a bit of an ice bridge kind of background thing.
I love it. Hopefully I have enough snow. So we're jumping right out the gate with me starting on my box frame. I knew based on my sketch I wanted to create a bit of an embankment, so I used some XPS foam that Monkey brought with him and cut it down to size after marking up the length. This stuff is apparently quite hard to get in the UK these days. Monkey got it out of an old TV box, but if you can get your hands on it, it's absolutely excellent crafting material. I then went in with my hobby blade and cut away a few chunks here and there so the surface wasn't perfectly flat. The next stage, I'm going to be adding a bunch of sculptor mold all over the top, but I wanted a little bit of a weird surface below so it didn't just stick oddly and look all flat and boring. I hot glued it to the frame so it was ready to go, and with that, let's check back in with Monkey. All right, what are we doing over here, monks?
So, Crom on a bridge. Well, this will be an ice bridge.
Yeah.
Killing some orcs, basically.
I love it.
That's the start.
Very good. While he carved out his ice bridge, I started cracking on with the sculptor mold. I've never used this stuff before, but it's absolutely brilliant. It's essentially paper fibers that you mix with water to create kind of a really fancy paper mache. I was advised by Monkey that when I do this, I should do it in small batches because it dries rather quickly. So I did 2 lots of this and plastered it all over the XPS foam to create a nice embankment. Once I was happy with the texture, I left it all to dry, and then popped over to see how Monkey was doing. And he was doing very much the same thing, getting ready with his ice bridge that he'd carved out nicely with a hobby scalpel, and he was gluing it in place ready for the sculptor mold layer. Monkey was doing things slightly differently and left the back of his frame on so he had an easier time gluing everything together. So Monkey's now here, he's got this far in the bridge. What are we doing with this bit, mate?
I've run out. I've got to make up a new batch.
It's just for the sake of like half an inch. Oh, what we'd do for half an inch. Oh well. I don't usually make jokes like that on this channel. Loot jokes aside, whilst Monkey fixed up that final area and my frame was drying, I went ahead and built the subject of my diorama. If anyone wants to know, it's the standard bearer's body from the command kit, mixed with a grenade launcher and a few other options, alongside a female head because I thought it was cool. Monkey had now finished up with all his sculptor mold and was now building his orcs. He was trying to replicate the scene on the picture as best he could, and I'd say he got pretty close. He's got 2 orcs that are in the throes of death / falling off the bridge, and one guy who's trying to line up a shot on old Dragon Gaze. Like any good hobbyist trying to replicate something, Monks kept his reference picture to hand so he knew roughly what he was going for, with that little bit of artistic license. Once I was happy that my guardsman was dry, I moved on to the painting phase. The scheme is no different to the tanks and guardsmen you've seen before. Panzer Grey as a base coat and Black Legion on the fatigues, and, you know, standard highlights and stuff like that. We won't labour the point. Now this model is going to be facing off into the distance, so we're not going to see her front very often, but I put as much effort in as I always do, and ended up painting one of the best guardsman faces I've done on such a small scale, and we're never going to see it again. Hooray! At this point I've been painting about 45 minutes, and Monkey was pinning his orcs together ready for their painting phase. The pins he's adding are just going to help support them as they stick to that XPS foam and sculptor mold bridge he's created. Showing off the models, this guy is going to be flying backwards after getting shot, and then there's another guy who's going to be kind of toppling forwards. The other guy's got a shooter and he'll be just fine. Knowing from my sketches and thoughts that I wanted my scene to be quite reflective in nature and have the guardsman looking off after doing something tragic, I thought this little grave marker would be an excellent addition to really reflect that. Once I'd done that, I masked up my box frame to protect the edges and sprayed it with brown paint. Okay, Monks, we've run into an issue. Talk me through what's happening and what you're doing.
So, sculptor mold's finished. Did a nice spray to get my kind of base layer down. But
yeah.
The MDF frame has done some weird things.
Yeah, you got some like textures going on there.
And you can even see the IKEA logo in the background, which kind of spoils the immersion.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure it'll come up on camera. Oh, you might come up on camera. It's right there if you see it.
Yeah. So, plan is use some plastic card.
Yeah.
Trim out the size.
Yeah.
And then we'll try and airbrush the background on that.
Lovely.
First time for that, so we'll see how it goes.
Well, same for everybody in the room. It'd be exciting.
Yeah.
Whilst Monkey cut and trimmed his plasticard to size, I brought my frame back in after it was drying in the sun and cleaned up any areas the masking tape had covered up. Next was to add a bunch of variation. I went through with the airbrush on a couple of passes, starting with Mornfang Brown, adding a bit of Corn Red, and finally a little bit of Avalan Sunset to create those nice textures and gradients inside the mud. I then followed that up with Rhinox Hide, using it as a shade from below to create some more variation in the shadows and add a bit of darkness to the scene. Alright, let's see where Monks is at.
So, just covering up my mistakes actually. So, plasticard in the background.
Oh, that was bloody satisfying.
Good, that was on it.
That was indeed satisfying. After that, I went back and added Agrax Earthshade all over my little diorama just to tone everything down and bring it in line. This helped blend the reds and yellows I created into a nice muddy texture. Meanwhile, Monkey had gone outside and primed his orc models white and was starting work on the skin. He did tell me that the skin is his favourite part to do because it's super easy. You use a contrast paint, any green will do, and dry brush over top and you've got nice layers. Whilst everything was drying, I went back to my diorama and started adding some barbed wire. This was another tip from Monkey. You take 2 pieces of 1mm wire and wrap them around each other. Once they're wrapped, you can then circle them up around your finger and you've got some really nice looking concertina wire. This is a really simple process and it looks the part. I made 2 of these bad boys, or barbed boys. Yeah, I don't know. And I made 2 of these things and stuck them on either side to bracket the scene and create a bit of depth. As they're not going to be touched, I went straight in with my silver colour rather than priming. Naughty, I know. And with that, we actually wrapped up our first day. Monkey, it's day 2. I have hay fever. What are we doing today?
Suffering in the heat.
Oh.
And then finish painting the orcs.
Orkies. I'm going to give you a hand with that.
Thanks. Yeah, that'd be
I got
cool.
stuff drying, so I'll give you a hand.
I think I'm running out of bit of time, and then I need to airbrush Sky, do a bit of Bob Ross mountain thing, and then the snow flocks. So.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I've not airbrushed a background before, and neither of you, so it could either go really well or yeah.
If it goes really badly, then you'll never see this part of the video. So either way.
Yeah, we'll just cut to it smashed on the sidewalk outside on the path. Yeah. All right, let's crack on.
I gave up the painting desk for a time to allow Monkey to airbrush his backdrop. He started with Calidor Sky and ended up making a bit of a gradient as he worked his way through. Meanwhile, I made myself useful and helped out by painting the orcs. I used contrast paints for the entire thing and did a little bit of highlighting up. We're not really going to cover it, but it was really an enjoyable process. I might have to paint more orcs. The only ones I've done so far are dead. It took quite some time, but Monkey kept working through layer after layer, working through various blues to create a nice dark blue at the top into a light blue at the bottom gradient, and the final result ended up looking really nice. He also made sure all the edges were a nice dark blue to keep it clean. I'd completed the orcs in the meantime, and I thought they were looking really good. With these done and the airbrush work that Monkey's been doing drying, I started work on my piece again. I built up some mud texture to look like some freshly tilled earth and added the grave to it. This is going to be just off to the side of our guardsman, and hopefully will add a little bit of a tragic, slightly poetic feel to the piece. Or that's really pretentious, I don't know. I dry brushed everything with a mix of Baylor and Mornfang Brown, and then added pins to the bottom of our main character. I made sure the pins were really sturdy, as she's only small and I don't want her falling over. And now for the moment of triumph. Beautiful. Really satisfying. With our protagonist added, I added in a bunch of barbed wire to the left and right that we painted earlier. I also took this time whilst everything was settling in to add a few tufts and bits of grass all over the top, just to break up that ground. I moved my diorama off to the side so Monkey could continue working on his background mountains. In his own words, he wanted to do it in a Bob Ross style, and the final result is actually very impressive. Started with Panzer Grey as a nice dark base colour in order to draw out the outlines and fill everything in before we added the highlights. So whilst Monkey had never done this before, he actually ended up with some really good looking mountains, and he just used the wet blending effect going up through his highlights bit by bit.
Monkey, I think we're onto a winner here by accident. The weird mistakes we had with the bubbling at the back has made this far easier to paint on, actually, because you've had to put plastic art in.
Nice, yeah.
Whereas previously, we'd have been painting on paper, using the airbrush, all that stuff, probably would have crinkled up. So this is an accidental win. Love it.
It's a happy little accident, as Bob Ross would say.
Nice one, Bob.
Continuing the theme of happy little accidents, Monkey started adding what was supposed to be snow initially, and it still remained snow at the end, but we realised it was a really nice highlight colour, so he focused it to one side of the mountains and a few of the little ridges, and it ended up as a really cool effect. After only a short time, Monkey had finished his mountains and they looked absolutely excellent. I do think this deserves a round of applause for someone who's never painted much freehand before and has definitely never done mountains in the background of a Warhammer diorama before. Well done, monks. Great show. We set Monkey's project aside to allow it time to dry, and I wanted to add this little tree from Woodland Scenics to my diorama. This would add a nice bit of height to the project and make everything really cool and add a little bit of oranges and browns to the effect. Okay, there's already a lot of browns, so adding oranges. I used Troll Slayer orange all over the trees to give them a nice autumn feel. I painted up the trunk with some wildwood, one coat, nice and simple. It's a background piece after all, and used the pin to pop it into the diorama. And I think that was a really good decision. After this, we popped back to Monkey's diorama and started adding some icicles. We cut up a little plastic box into little triangles and used some UV resin and a UV torch to activate it to create nice little see-through bits of ice. We then worked together using my camera hand and third hand to help to glue it to the diorama, and they look amazing. Now jumping back to mine as we approach the end, I had this art print from ages ago that was a really cool nebula effect, and I thought that would make an amazing weird sci-fi backdrop. It's nice to reuse stuff like this because otherwise it's just going to go to waste. I super glued it to the back and then added some rust effects to the barbed wire before cutting the print down to size, using the frame as a nice guide, so everything's going to fit together nicely in the final piece. We're starting to roll headlong towards the final reveal now, and we only have a few steps left. Monkey's scene needed a whole lot of snow, so we mixed baking powder, white paint and some Mod Podge together to create our own snow effects.
I then pasted this all over with a nice looking, almost dessert spatula thing, and then went in with a brush to stab it all together. Monkey, meanwhile, was smoothing things out with gloved hands to make sure it covered nicely, and we had a few little snowdrifts hanging over the edge. Monkey then cut a few spare orc legs from the sprues and created some footprints into this newly created deep snow. With the footprints added, we're so close to adding the minis. I just mixed up a little concoction of Mod Podge and water, about 50-50, to drip all over the snow to make sure it dried hard and didn't flake inside the frame. Whilst we waited for that to dry, I suddenly had the idea to add a few little flowers and bits and pieces to the grave. So I cut away a few white flowers, white just because it contrasts the background nicely, and super glued those on. In things like this, the little details make everything. The transition from the mud to the tufts was looking a bit weird, so I added a thin glaze of some Death Guard green just to tie them all together. Then I added some brush-on varnish just to make sure all that glossiness from the Agrax Urshade went away. Now onto those final satisfying moments, we added Crom Dragon Gaze to the effect, pushing him deep into the snow as he's been standing there for hours holding this bridge. Up next was Shooter Orc. Next, we added our first Falling Orc. We're now so close to the end, we have one more mini to add, and with that, we will be complete. And so, of course, with the final push, he snapped. Never mind, he's in fine, we've glued their hands back on. And with that, we're complete. Thanks so much to Monkey for coming down. I've been Sam. See you next time.